My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I think I have an interesting show, and of course I have to say up front that this might trigger some people, so be ready for that. I want to do a show on white privilege, and I want to do this because it seems to be a topic that many people are talking about. There's a lot of debate, and I also think it has a lot of sociological and psychological implications. So I think it is important that we talk about it and that we try to do it in a way that is not too triggering for people, but yet we're going to have to talk about some facts and some figures here. Now, full disclosure up front, I am a liberal Democrat, so that's kind of where my roots are. And so therefore, I do want to talk about this in a political sense as well. So I really want to answer the question, is forcing people to believe that white privilege exists, is it destructive or not? And there might be a better way to talk about this. So I'll tell you right up front, do I believe that there is white privilege? Yes, right? So we could end the show right there. No, it's a lot more nuanced than that, and I want to get into some details. So let's take it from the top, because we wouldn't be talking about this probably if this term white privilege wasn't coined and pushed and encouraged by a lady named Peggy McIntosh. Now, she's a women's studies scholar who coined the term white privilege. Now, being that she made up the term white privilege, I guess she's allowed to make up any definition she wants, and she did. So let's go with that, because it seems what the masses are also going by her definition. But we are allowed to critically think, and we can also pull apart the words she says. So this is what Peggy McIntosh says. White privilege is an invisible package of quote unquote unearned assets which white people, mostly white men, can count on cashing in each day solely based on the color of their skin, and about which they remain totally oblivious to their privilege. Okay, so that's her definition. Now, from a political sense, again, I'm liberal. If a lot of liberals believe that, and the far left of the Democratic Party does, how do you get conservatives or Republicans to listen to you when you're using inflammatory words such as you have unearned assets and you're cashing in on each day, but you have no idea that you have power? Like, that sounds in a way that if you were talking to a friend, you wouldn't talk like that. It's a very divisive statement. And if you don't think it is, then you're oblivious, because a white man especially would find that in a way that it sounds more like attacking than trying to express an opinion. And continuing with that, there's another lady, and her name is Robin DiAngelo, again, very important for this discussion. She coined the term white fragility. Now, she also wrote a book called Why is it so hard for white people to talk about racism? Now, you don't have to be an expert here, but I'll tell you why. It's because every time a white man has an opinion, everybody yells out racist. And so therefore, when we talk about white privilege, what is a white man not privileged to have? Let's say, for example, well, he's not allowed to have an opinion. Let's start with that. So a lot of white men tend to be quiet. They don't say anything. They do their jobs. They take care of their families, and then they go and vote. And then people are so shocked and surprised about how they voted when they're being put down and labeled in this way and being called a racist. Now, on the conservative party, there are enough racists to go around. I'm sure of it. That's why I'm not part of that particular party. However, you just can't go throwing around the term racist every time somebody disagrees with you, or you cannot understand their opinion, Or said in another way, if you don't have the ability to show empathy and compassion for another person, that's your fault because you can't see their point of view. It's not theirs. So let's continue with this because the word, again, she made this up, Robin DiAngelo. She termed it white fragility. Now, as a man, there's nothing about me that's fragile. And I have a lot of friends that are white. Not one of us will admit that we are fragile. And so therefore, again, that's being divisive. You are never going to impress or encourage the white working class people of America to vote for you if you're going to put them down and treat them poorly. As a matter of fact, most white people from rural areas need liberal democratic policies. But they vote against their best interests because they don't want to be hated by people. So they don't want to be in a party that makes fun of them and calls them fragile. But let's see the definition of fragile. According to Robin DiAngelo, she says, white fragility is any defensive reaction or disagreement that a white person has or experiences when questioned or told about racism. All right, so what you're saying is that the white person is not allowed to have a thought, a feeling, an emotion, an opinion, or a perception. You have to take on the other person's point of view of the world. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And I say this because we talk about this a lot with people. If you're a type of person who denies somebody's reality and you invalidate their experience, you are gaslighting them. Plain and simple. It's lying, but on steroids. So here we have any white disagreement or a white person who has a question or has a thought or thinks a little bit differently than Peggy McIntosh or Robin DiAngelo, they're fragile. It can't be that they have a difference of opinion, and it can't be that they have maybe different life experiences. So again, we're using divisive terms like fragility and unearned. And if you don't go along with the program, you're fragile. That's gaslighting 101. Sorry to call that out. Now let's take an honest look at this. Because again, I do believe that white privilege exists, but how are we going to talk about it in a manner that doesn't ostracize so many people? So let's take a look at the argument. Now, there's strengths and flaws in every argument. So let's look at a strength. Number one, white privilege, the strength of that argument. It's true. In many instances, white people do have privilege. Absolutely, 100% true. You can name it in many, many ways. I could do a whole nother show on that, but let's not, because we understand that white people do have privilege. But here's a couple of other questions just to back that up to make sure that that assertion is stronger. Number one, why do people expect more out of white people? Because that's where the privilege is, right? We are prejudging a white person to be more or to have more. Why is that? I'll leave that for you. You can answer that on your own time. Here's another question. Is it possible that white people have less privilege than some other groups of people in the United States? Just a question. Like if we want to talk about straight socioeconomics, we would see that Jewish people who are not white tend to make more money than your average white person. Asian people, who are also a minority, do tend per capita to make more money than your average white person. Black people from Nigeria also tend to make more money than your average white person. So now we have to parse out the details of what this white privilege really is. Because if we're going to say that white people they make more money and they're better advantaged financially and they're treated better, More than who? Because there are other groups that are not being singled out that make more money than white people. Just facts. Now let's take a look at some flaws. As a general thought, complaining about other people and their perceived benefits, instead of trying to empower yourself, it teaches learned helplessness. It teaches the victim mentality. And encourages what Friedrich Nietzsche would say is the slave morality. In other words, there's masters, there's slaves, there's nothing we can do about it. So let's be like Peggy McIntosh and Robert DiAngelo, and let's just get everybody ready with pitchforks and just take down the people who maybe seem to have some power, but don't ask why they have that power. Let's just resent them for it. That's number one. Number two, let's take a look at the Socratic method just a little bit. So let's look at some exceptions where being white is not necessarily an advantage. So kind of what I was alluding to already. Do Asian people and Jewish people believe that there's white privilege? It's a good question. By percentage, I haven't heard them say that. And there's a reason for that, but you can figure that out yourself. Let's look at some more. Are there exceptions where being white is not an advantage? Well, to get loans, if you're a white man, it's a little bit harder to get a loan, even if you can provide the same amount of income as somebody else from a different group. That's true. And you can make more money than somebody in a different group and still not get the loan, but somebody else can get that loan. And you could say the same thing about getting into some schools. Again, there are some people from disadvantaged groups that are said to be disadvantaged, and they could get into schools that some white people cannot. Now, just for the record, not every white person is rich. like I need to say that, but I guess I do, right? So that's part of it. Also, are white people poor? There's a tremendous amount of white poverty in the United States, especially through the rural areas. Do white people experience incredible traumas? They do. They're people. How about health? Sometimes people are just born and they're unlucky. They are not privileged. They have health issues. You can do everything you want in life, work out, eat the right way, do all the things, but sometimes you just can't outrun your genetics. It's the way it is. It's a privilege to have health. I mean, was George Burns, I don't know if he drank, but he smoked like every single day, and he still lived to be over 100 years old, or about 100. It's privilege in a sense, isn't it? It is. Does white privilege actually exist in rural areas where if you're a liberal Democrat, you're trying to get their votes? You would want them to come to your side because your policies actually help them out in rural areas. And you're trying to sell that white people have privilege in rural areas. Well, besides the fact that most people in rural areas are poor, their nearest hospital might be 4 or 5 hours away. If they have animals, they don't know what to do because their dog's not feeling well, but the vet, again, is like 4 or 5 hours away. Their food there is more expensive, and yet they get paid less. And the stores are like miles and miles away. So again, more wear and tear on your car. Gas is more expensive there. I mean, it's just loaded with adversities that they have to go through. But where's the white privilege there? Because in rural areas, they're almost all white. So they're not being privileged over any other race. There's no other races there. So just asking white rural people to buy into white privilege and white fragility is something that's never going to happen. And I keep thinking about this, that I should run for office one day, because you need to know how to talk to those people, because it shows a complete lack of empathy and compassion. and complete ignorance to talk to people like that, because there's not even any minorities in those areas. So who are they privileged over? Nobody. The only people that one person might be privileged over another is somewhat earned privilege, because there's a family who lives in their town that has done a lot of good service and maybe is very valuable to the community. Therefore, when Peggy McIntosh says that these are unearned assets, what is she talking about? Because privileges, for the most part, are earned, as is respect, which you can put either way if you want to say that too. There is a white respect as well. Why is that? Answer those questions for yourself. Let's continue. Again, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. When I do therapy with people, and what all therapists do, we tend to lean on cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the things we talk about is cognitive distortions. One of the cognitive distortions I'd like to talk about is all or nothing thinking, which is also called black and white thinking, but I don't want to say that because I'm going to trigger a whole bunch of people. So let's just say it's all or nothing thinking, where somebody thinks everything is good or everything is bad. There's no gray, there's no middle grounds, there's no nuance, there's no differences of opinion or perceptions. It's either yes this way or no that way. And again, that's a cognitive distortion, because most things in life, there's some type of middle ground. So again, if we're trying to figure out if indeed white privilege exists, but we also have to, because it does, but we have to prove that there's no other privileges that exist. Because then why would we only be talking about the privilege of the white? So are there other groups with privilege? That's a question Socrates would ask. Because if you can find an exception to the rule, your assertion sucks, and it's not worth saying. Point blank. So let's go over some of these, because you could do this all day long. Might it be true that if you're born into a certain economic class, that you have more privileges than others? Yes, that's the answer. How about the halo effect? Very important term in psychology. If you find somebody to be physically attractive, you ascribe positive attributes to that person. Doesn't matter what your skin tone is. And this goes for men or women. If you look at a man and you find him attractive, you're going to think he's probably nicer, and there's nicer things about him. If you see a beautiful woman, you might overlook some things, her personality, and overall you're going to have a favorable experience of her. Halo effect. Is it based on skin tone? It can be if somebody has an affinity for a certain skin tone, but no, it doesn't really have anything to do with that. So again, more privilege based on beauty. How about intelligence? People don't want to talk about it, but it's true. People are born with a certain capacity to learn, and there are people who are more intelligent than others. And of course, that would help you be more valuable in society. You could probably make more money. Okay, is that a privilege? Absolutely yes. How about the country you're born in? I'm happy to be born in the United States. I was born in the United States because of my ancestors. And again, you'll hear this too when talk about white privilege. Your people didn't come over here on a boat. You got to watch who you're talking to, because my family did come over here on a boat. And it wasn't like decades and decades and hundreds of years ago that I have no connection to. No, my grandparents came here on a boat. Okay, now they wanted to. That's, a big difference. But they did come here on a boat, and they had no money, by the way, obviously. I'll talk a little bit more about that. But yes, proud to be an American, absolutely. And even though they came here and they were beaten up and tortured and not treated well because they were Italian, they still loved America because they knew that at some point they could make it. Continuing, what about your height? Height is a big deal, right? Like a lot of people like people who are taller. And again, it's kind of like the halo effect. We ascribe certain attributes to people who are taller, like they're stronger, they're more powerful, they're more intelligent. As a matter of fact, most millionaires happen to be over 6 feet tall. Can't totally explain that, but it's true. How about women? Now, we always say that they're like a weaker class, or they're minorities, or, it's like white men have all the power. Is there instances where women have more power than men? There's too many to mention. I'll mention one as a personal trainer. Now, I have trained many, many women over the years, and many of them, not all, but many, have not had jobs. And I work all the time, and the women who don't work, they live a better lifestyle than me, and they have more money than me. And why? Because they are having sex or they're married to a guy who is very rich. Now, when they get divorced, they still make more money than me. Is that a privilege? Of course it is. It's a tremendous privilege. When do you see a multi-millionaire woman marrying a guy and the guy stays at home and just collects money? I'll wait. It's like 0%. So is there privilege in being a beautiful woman in the United States? Come on. We know the answer to this. Don't lie. Of course. Of course. Continuing. Age. Is it beneficial to be youthful and young in the United States? Absolutely. Now, if you're a therapist or a doctor, it's helpful to be older because people think you have more experience. Either way, age is also a privilege. Sexual orientation. If you're heterosexual, is there a privilege to that? Yes, absolutely, 100%. However, is it maybe possible that being gay is also a privilege in certain situations? I'll give you the answer. I've worked in fitness my whole life. Part of that was as a model. I was doing very well. And I can tell you one of the reasons that just stopped my career after a while, because I was running into dead end to another dead end, is because 99.9% of the photographers are gay men. And so they would do a photo shoot with me, and then they would want to have sex, or they would invite me to a Broadway play, or they'd want to do lunch in the city somewhere, or they would invite me over their house for a sleepover, and my answers were always no. End of career, at least with that person. Then you find another photographer, same thing over and over. If I was gay, that would have given me the royal road, at least to be able to have a chance of making more money. But I was heterosexual. There's no privilege in being heterosexual in the modeling world. Not a chance. How about religion? Is it possible that certain religions have presidents or privilege in the United States? And yes, that's possible. Of course it is. I mean, if you're Catholic in the United States, or a WASP, which technically would be Protestant, but still, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that they are thought of better in a sense than, say, Muslims. However, what would a Jewish person say? Jewish people have, again, there's this little thing called the Holocaust that they went through, and they typically do get a lot of negative treatment, and there's a lot of prejudice towards Jewish people. Do they consider themselves to be privileged? Although they get treated poorly most of the time, they actually do consider themselves to be privileged because they're very proud of their culture. They're very proud of their people. And that's really what it comes down to, doesn't it? Is that you can't have other people make you feel bad for who you are. It comes down to who you are and you wanting to stand up for your culture. How about health? Again, I know there's so much here we're going through, but I don't want to hear all the people going, okay, but you didn't mention this, you didn't mention that. So let's mention it. Health is also a privilege. Some people don't have great health. So again, that's important. So again, there are hundreds of ways that people can gain privilege in this country. Being white is only one, and only under certain circumstances. So let's continue with our breakdown of Peggy McIntosh and Robin DiAngelo. Let's say this: recognizing white privilege without recognizing any other group's privileges is absolutely 100% racist. It's divisive, and it only creates opposition and hostility from white people. And there's a good reason for it. And here's the other thing. People like Robin DiAngelo and Peggy McIntosh and a lot of other people, not all, but a lot of them who believe in only white privilege and they don't see any other privileges. They're trying to normalize racism against white people. And the reason or how they're doing this is because they automatically assume that a white-skinned person is an oppressor and they are the oppressed. Therefore, they can do anything and say anything that they want because they supposedly don't have power. So you can't be racist. You can't be prejudiced against a white person in their minds, in what these people have written, that somehow these people are ingesting and somehow believing, which most of them tend to be on the younger side, and most of them tend to have absolutely zero ability for critical thinking. Let's move on. Again, as a licensed marriage and family therapist, some of your weapons are empathy and compassion and understanding of other people. And terming only white privilege, and if you don't totally buy into it, that you are somehow a fragile human being, that's a racist, shows no empathy and compassion and no understanding for other people. And if you don't show empathy and understanding, you're not going to get it back. So there's no way you're going to sell this to the people that you need to sell. You are completely distancing yourself from the white working class in America. Although I'm not, but I can see why people would say this, and I still think democratic principles are the way to go. However, I don't like this part of the Democratic Party at all. I find it to be extremely racist, and you can't end racism by being a racist. It doesn't work that way. Let's go over some more things, because this show's a little bit longer than I thought. I'm going to have to make it in, I'm going to have to make more than one episode here. Let's talk about what Peggy McIntosh said a little bit. She said that these are unearned privileges. Sometimes they are, like height, right? That's unearned. Sometimes it could be anything, but let's go over this. People tend to stereotype based on prior experiences with people of that race or nationality. They go by reputation. They go by their expectations of that person. They go by the prior performance of that person. If that's true, and it is, it becomes that every relative in a family is responsible for adding virtue to their family. I'll explain more. Let's go back. Somebody also might say that you can be poor like I was. You can come from a family I came from a single parent. My mother, my father was around, but I was raised by a single mom, and my father did go to jail. So in like a racist type of view, you could say I lived a black life, if you want to say that. I wouldn't say that, but that's what these idiots are trying to say in a certain sense. But you could say my problems didn't exist because of the color of my skin, whereas with white privilege, that's the one issue that I didn't have. It was a problem. Sell it to somebody else as well. Because I'm going to use a word here, and I'm Italian, so I'm allowed to use it, but it is a slur. My grandparents came here with no money. The Irish people came here first. They had the jobs. They had fireman jobs. They had police jobs. When Italians got here, yes, it was the color of their skin and who they were that caused problems. Were Italians lynched? Yes. Not as much as black people, I get it, but that's not the point. And there's a reason why they called Italians, and here's the slur, Dagos. The term Dago means because an Italian they would try to work, nobody would give them jobs, but if they were lucky to get one, that would be fine. But they weren't allowed out at night because they weren't allowed to start making connections with people because nobody wanted to think that Italians were humans. They didn't want them to assimilate into society. So you were only allowed to be out during the day. So Italian would figure it out. There he goes during the day. An Italian was only allowed out during the day. If an Italian man especially stepped outside the door and it was at night, he would be arrested for nothing other than just being Italian and being alive and being outside. Thus we have the term paddy wagon because the Irish people were the police. They would gather up as many Italians as they could, put them in the paddy wagon, paddy meaning it was a slur, again, Italian men used for Irish men. It says paddy, right, as St. Patrick's Day is coming up. It was the paddy wagon. Irish people, again, would get all the Italians because of the color of their skin and who they were and not allow them to have jobs, and they would keep arresting them. So take it somewhere else if you want to say that skin is not a problem. And this didn't happen 400 years ago, okay? I knew my grandparents. So I don't want to hear it, okay? Again, you can't act like everything in this world is one thing and it's a monolith. It's not. If you want to talk to people and you want to move people to an opinion, have empathy and compassion and understand that everybody has a different life experience. Continuing, as an Italian, I never feel like I did it on my own. Most Italians feel this way. I've gotten to where I've gotten, not on my own, but I was carried on the shoulders of all my ancestors before me. And it's even hard to say, it's still emotional because I know what my ancestors have gone through. And every one of them tried to push the ball forward. And none of them acted like they had the victim mentality. So when we say that white people, by the way, Italians aren't white. They just became white over time. They were considered to be white. And there's something interesting too. Italians became white, and Jewish people are considered to be white a lot of times now too. Why? Because they're successful? That's a weird way to say it. Because there are a lot of successful people in this country that are not technically white. So let's move on from that. But if you say that privilege is unearned, I'm going to say you don't know what you're talking about. Because a lot of it is based on reputation. It's based on the Italians that came before me that worked hard and did the best they could. And that's why we have a reputation of being a certain way. That's why when you meet an Italian, there's a pretty good feeling that you're going to have that this person is going to be, he's going to work hard, he's going to be honest, he's going to do certain things. Let me give you a short list because I know this show is a little too long for most people. But again, privilege is based off of your reputation. Let's say I want a music contract, right? I don't know anybody in the music business, so it's going to be harder for me. But if my father was like somebody famous and he was a musician, I'm going to be able to move forward because of him. And that's the point. Privilege is earned by the people who came before you, but you have to do good things for people to expect good things from you. Let's go down just a short list, for example. So let's take A.P. Giannini. He opened a bank in San Francisco. It's called the Bank of Italy. How did he do it? He did it, he was collecting gold and silver from people with a handshake. Why? Because people trusted him. He had the gift of gab like a lot of Italians do, and he knew how to connect with people, and he worked hard. So that's how he was able to do it. And yes, that bank is the biggest bank in the United States right now, and they're all over the place. It became the Bank of America, founded by an Italian. Italians are proud of their culture. Don't ever tell them that their privilege is unearned. because they're breaking their back and they're living and they're dying and they're doing everything else to move the ball forward for everybody else in their family. Their privilege absolutely is earned. If you don't know that, it means that you come from a family who doesn't work very hard or doesn't understand ancestry. Let's continue. Italians, they will tell you with no problem at all, we are the best. We are the best at art. I don't know, Michelangelo, take a look. Music, we got Sinatra, Pavarotti, Caruso, Madonna, Lady Gaga, keep going. There's so much, Tony Bennett. We're the best at math. We're the best at science. We invented the telephone. We're the best at making cars. If you don't think so, drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari if you can afford one. Best designers. You don't think so? Okay, Versace, Gucci, Valentino, Prada. Best movie directors, actors, and actresses are all over Hollywood. They're the best looking. You're Sophia Loren, Gina Lollobrigida, Monica Bellucci, go on and on and on. Best food, of course, Italian food. We have the best coffee. We're known for being passionate, affectionate. We're known for being very good with family and caring about family and doing anything for our family. Family is a priority. Italians love children. They love other people's children. They love life. They love people who are very young, and they also have an incredible respect for the elderly. A respect for life overall and doing the right thing and living with dignity and honor. They're also known as the best drivers because we make the best cars, and we're also known as the best lovers. And we can go on and on and on. So you can't say that when you come up and you see an Italian and somebody says, oh, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, there's a reason for that. It's because there's hundreds of years of backing it up, of what our culture stands for. That's why. So these Peggy McIntoshes and Robin DiAngelos in the world have no idea what they're talking about. Hopefully this wasn't too long, and hopefully I gave you some things to think about. As a quick review, yes, white privilege exists. Absolutely, 100%. But it's not racist for a white person to say that there are hundreds of other privileges. And to say that it's okay that I should accept the fact that my parents were divorced, I've had trauma, I was poor, but it's okay because my skin was white, that's there's no way you're going to sell that politically to people. It's not going to work. You need to be more caring and compassionate about people. And once again, you cannot solve racism by being a racist. So let's answer the question. Is forcing people to accept white privilege destructive? Yes. But I'll leave your opinion up to you. My name is Joe Peroni. Hopefully this has been beneficial in some way. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.